Yo guys, it's your friend here from ninjavibeZ. We are back to you another awesome Naruto What If tale. What if Kurama was sent to the past to train Naruto? If you want a next chapter, just hit the like button. Now without further ado, I'll leave you with the fanfic. Naruto found himself up against a wall almost immediately. That easier intermediary step Jiraiya had showed him was a skill he learned was for those with already good chakra control as it was. He just barely managed to burn the paper without setting it on fire. Not something as precise as creating an impression. Fortunately, Kurama guided him through even more easier chakra exercises to help. And even Kakashi showed him a few interesting ones when he discovered what he was having trouble with. He didn't give up. Definitely not. But he did take a break for a while. Reassess his priorities. Kurama having shadow clones was definitely more important right now. If you're done procrastinating, I'm not procrastinating. I agree. You need a break. But your trapping skills need work. Naruto frowned. What are you talking about? My traps are great. Does Kakashi ever fall for them? Does any? He sighed. No, I guess not. Then if you are going to continue to be attacked by missing Nae, you need better traps. Am I going to get attacked? I really don't think every Sarank is going to be like that one. Remember what I taught you. Right. Just who is going to teach me? I know Kakashi is pretty good, but I don't think Sasuke or Sakura are that interested, and they have their own training. What about your summon? He doesn't speak though. How am I going to learn if I can't understand him? Well, I guess you'll just have to learn. Naruto hated learning languages. It was almost as bad as learning Seal script, but there wasn't even anything to write down to help him remember anything but his fox summon. He was great. He did, in fact, have a name, but as it was rather unpronounceable as a human, he gave up and just called him a made-up name of his own invention, Fukuda. He didn't seem to mind. He also didn't seem to mind pranking the hell out of the villagers. Ninja or no, he was also good at it, better than he was. Of course, he should have expected that given his trapping skills, but that could have easily just been his trap disabling skills. And it wasn't like trapping skills necessarily meant you were good at pranking. Fukuda was a genius, though, an evil genius, but still a genius. Naruto had never considered a paperclip to be an essential ninja tool, but he had quickly learned his lesson. He learned a lot of lessons, often the hard way, too, as Naruto himself was just as valid a target. Naruto had to compensate by making sure that he was always planning something for his friend to join. Otherwise, he was often the most interesting target. Once Kurama's translations finally started to stick and he understood more of what he was saying, he had to admit that the trap evasion skills were ultimately just as important, no matter how much it stung to be covered head to toe in molasses. Still, for someone he spent half the time angry at and the other half gleefully plotting with, he really liked having him around. And so despite Jiraiya's warning that most summons didn't like to be called frivolously, Naruto sort of kept him around even when Team 7 were training together or he had his daily chakra exercises and sealing work with Jiraiya. He also happened to be the only person in the village other than maybe Ira that Kurama didn't have some sort of problem with. That's not true. That ramen family is just fine. And a few of your classmates aren't entirely terrible. Naruto rolled his eyes. Good to know. That meant that he spent most of his off time from the other teams as a fox. It did mean good stealth training, though. His team, and Jiraiya, for that matter, knew about his henge abilities now, but he still didn't feel comfortable with it spread around too much, especially not enough where enemy ninja might hear about it. He certainly wasn't strong enough for that. Like the Hiraishin, he had already realized that even if he got his chakra control good enough to make seals in the air, the three-person jutsu was good for one thing, escaping, or maybe two things, escaping and reinforcements. But without being strong enough, escaping in an absolute emergency was the only viable use. It wasn't just Kurama who knew stories of his father. It was the entirety of, well, the entire world. But IWA was particularly affected. If someone knew that he could use even the incomplete version, it wouldn't matter if people recognized his relation to his father or not. A lot of people would want him dead, as it was the best he could do was a single-use trio of papers that had smaller timed explosives for self-destruction after use. He didn't even want to have to use that just in case someone was really good at memorization or had something like the sharing gun. Speaking of other villages, there were quite a few foreign ninjas strolling around. Normally, even the ninja of villages they were allies with weren't supposed to cross even the border without permission. But based on the number of Anbu observing and yet not doing anything, they were probably there for a good reason. That didn't mean that they had the right to threaten academy students, though, no matter how annoying they were. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Naruto stepped out from around the corner and leveled a glare at the boy with face paint who currently had the student in the air by his collar. And what are you going to do about it? Naruto shrugged. Probably nothing. I know almost nothing about you, and I'm not a combat specialist, but I'm pretty sure the 5A and B surrounding you might have something they have in mind. His eyes widened. So unless you're trying to start a war between our villages and get yourself killed at the same time, I suggest you put him down. He put the kid shakily back on the ground who ran off with a nod of thanks. The other sand rolled her eyes. Kanaro, I told you to stop being an idiot. Of course, they'd have us under observation. So why are you here? She raised an eyebrow. Were you not informed to take the Tunin exam just like everyone else? Naruto nodded. Oh, all right. I think they might tell us last. Maybe so. We don't have time to prepare unfairly. Home field advantage and all that. She smirked. Home field doesn't matter if you have skill. I mean, it does if you trap the field to all hell, which is totally what I would have done if I'd known where the field actually was. Then I'm pretty sure it would give the people who know where the traps are a distinct advantage. Her eyes narrowed. So you would cheat? Naruto shrugged. We're ninja. She chuckled. Good. And here I thought Konoha would be a pushover. I swear everyone I meet in this village is insane. Naruto laughed. It's the insane ones you have to watch out for. Actually, the kunoichi suddenly shivered. Right. I forget that sometimes. He smiled. Well, it was nice to meet you. Not makeup guy, just you in particular. Nar cut across Kangaro's offended protestations. Oh, and I haven't really met you, guy with the gourd. But I suppose I should compliment you on your stealth because I actually didn't see you until a few seconds ago. I did, yeah, but you know where everyone is. It's a little unfair. No, I mean he's a Ginuriki, too. And now I feel even more embarrassed. How did I not notice that much chakra? The boy looked startled at Naruto's compliment. Thank you, mother. Acts strange around you. Nar considered the second statement and decided to ignore it completely. Like the word youth around a certain Jan, he considered what Kurama told him and went for broke. So who do you have? He pointed at his stomach. Inside you, I mean. The girl blanched. The boy looked at him oddly. Mother. Nar looked slightly put out. It did explain that strange statement. Though. Oh, they didn't tell you their name. Bummer. By the way, what's yours? Sabaku Nogara. I wonder if you will prove my existence. He gave a piercing stare and disappeared in a swirl of sand. His apparent teammates following in a slight panic. Naruto frowned. What was that about? Hell if I know. But if you're wondering who he has, it's Shikaku. How do you know? Simple. Nobody else is that insane. Naruto rolled his eyes. All right, I know what his chakra looks like. Happy. Anything I should know about him other than his overinflated ego, like I haven't seen that somewhere else. Hey, my ego is entirely earned. He's just butthurt that he's the weakest, so he isn't someone to be worried about. Kurama hesitated for a moment. No, you actually should be careful. I haven't actually gotten you to one tail's worth of chakra yet. And despite my teasing, Shikaku does have more power than a single tail. You might overpower him, you might not. I would be careful. It doesn't look like his seal is very good, which makes a full integration unlikely. But that also means that Shikaku himself might break free completely, and that's a bad thing for you, especially right now. I should get working on those shadow clones again. What does that stupid project have to do with anything? Naruto jumped to the roofs and started to make his way back towards the edge of the village. Just another theory, that's all. I won't be able to make anything else that much better before these exams, but I think I'm on the verge of something great here. Kakashi is expecting you in less than 3 minutes. Yeah, and he's always late. Besides, didn't you say I need to be better at multitasking? Kurama just sighed. It took only 10 minutes for his teammates to arrive and another 10 for them to finally get fed up. Nar, what are you doing? Those are some of the saddest clones I've seen since you tried the Academy version again 3 weeks ago. Naruto gave his teammate a large grin. I know, Sakura. It's great. It means I'm getting close. Sasuke snorted. If you're going to mess around before Sensei gets here, the least you could do is spar with one of us. They had long ago tried to show up closer to Kakashi's level of lateness. But the first time they tried, he had inexplicably shown up on time to the second and punished them for their tardiness severely, and not the extra training punishment like with Kurama. It was the you must complete 10 deer ranks before I even consider training you punishment, which was something nobody wanted no matter the level of masochism. It was also totally unfair because they didn't get to punish him for being constantly late, but at least he didn't mind them doing stuff before he got there. Sakura frowned. It does look like you're overloading the clones with chakra. But I thought that was impossible with your technique. Are you actually using the Academy clone? If so, you're doing surprisingly well. Naruto shook his head as he dispelled the clone and focused again. Nope. I'm trying to make the clones have less me in them. Why? Another clone appeared. This one was a rather Naruto-shaped pile of whitish nothing on the floor. Yes, almost there. The clone dispelled once again. Anyway, I'm hopefully making a new technique. It's based on the Kaga Bunction. This is the first step. Ah, that makes much more sense. Sasuke just made a curt nod, and his irritation, while not completely gone, was a lot more muted. He turned to his female teammate. Do you mind sparring while we wait? Sakura nodded, then turned to Naruto briefly. Do tell me if you come up with anything, though. I haven't heard of many new jutsu. I wouldn't have pegged you as the type. As his teammates went off to the side of the bridge, Naruto tuned out the clanging metal and examined his recent creation. It wasn't that impressive by any measure, just a mass of whitish-yellow gunk that sat in a sad pile on the wooden planks. And unfortunately, it wasn't even quite what he wanted, since he was pretty sure the top part just barely looked like it was in the shape of his hair. So, what do you think? I told you I don't care about this mess. But what do you think? Will it work? There isn't exactly a way to measure will in any reasonable way. Naruto, you've used my chakra plenty of times for clones and I certainly don't remember being inside of any of them despite that. The only reason I think this even has a chance of working is that sometimes I get the memories too. Really, it's certainly bizarre. Well, here goes. I know you don't want to give me more will than chakra, but could you at least try not to filter it this time? As long as you don't ask for too much. Sure. Only Naruto's constant exercises gave him any hope of differentiating between the colors inside his own body. Especially since the seal injected the chakra directly into his normal chakra system. But now that he had experience in recognizing his own will, Kurama's was far easier to see. And thus Naruto's first attempt was far more successful than even he expected. There was a poof of red chakra smoke. You didn't. Naruto grinned. You did. Naruto picked up the pebble-sized and rather angry nine-tailed fox off the ground, ignoring the fact that it kept trying to bite his finger repeatedly. Given that its jaw could barely fit over a fingernail, this was not a very successful venture. Come on, let me do it. Again. You can't be serious. That is the opposite of a useful jutsu. That's even the opposite of a good time. Can't you see just how much fun I'm having? Trust me, this will be great. Okay, fine. One more time. That's it. Naruto smiled as he gathered Kurama's chakra for the second time and released it into another puff of red smoke. He dropped the violently squirming fox still in his hand onto the second, newer one. The now slightly larger fox froze, wide-eyed. Even the Kurama inside his head paused in shock. Naruto, you are an idiotic genius. Do you know what you've done? Do you know what this means? It means you get to be free and more useful in combat. Yes, but that's not the point at all. This means that the seal doesn't matter at all. It means that I can be free, completely free, and you don't even have to die for that to happen. What? Quiet down, Kit. I'm not so sure people should know about this yet. Even if we got rid of that seal today, we might at most be able to share a body and change who's in charge. But that's it. Any attempt at separation and the shock would kill you within minutes. This though, that tiny clone of me is me. I can hear his voice in my head from here. And he can hear me. Well, my clones kind of are me too. I know. But your clones can't gather chakra of their own, can they? Huh, no. My point is that me inside you is that much weaker. The me outside of you is that much stronger. It will be slow, but it is very possible that you eventually could be free of me completely. Naruto stiffened. Oh dear. I suggest we keep the exact process rather quiet. We don't have to lie. Just withhold some of the truth. It's just a new variant on the shadow clone. That's all right. That it is. Naruto sat down roughly on the wood, not caring about any possible splinters. That it is. Naruto's mind was in a blur the entire time Kakashi was explaining the Chunin exams. And even as they walked over to registration, signed forms in hand, his thoughts were firmly on the tiny fox hidden in his equipment pouch. Kurama's voice was surprisingly gentle. I know, Kit. I don't know what to think either. That more than anything kept him from even acknowledging the loud ninja around him or even his team who stopped to interact with them. Sorry, but only teams of 3 are allowed to participate in the Chunin exams. He silently took that information in and decided to wait around for his teammates. Kurama wasn't supposed to be like this. He always knew what to do. Always had a plan and a backup to that backup. Even if it was as simple as running away from the village and starting over. Nar didn't even think he'd heard the words "I don't know" from him ever. Didn't bother to learn maybe. But being like this, he wasn't even quite sure to think himself. Of course, he wanted Kurama to be free. But now that it was right in front of him, he was almost scared. He had been scared before. It hadn't been this bad in a while, but he always had someone to calm him down, to tell him that everything would be all right, that he would be safe. But when Kurama spoke in his mind once more, he almost felt his own fear reflected back in that voice. "Nar Kit, we need to talk." Nar looked around the room. His teammates were still nowhere to be seen, which worried him slightly. But the time limit for registration was still a long way off. So he simply retreated to a corner of the room to meditate and talk to Kurama. "What do we need to talk about? Don't just pretend to meditate. Actually do it. Come on in. Face to face is better." Nar was dumbfounded. "I can do that," Kurama cursed as he realized his rather obvious oversight. "Yes. Now, just clear your mind. If you do it well enough, you'll fall into it." "Fall into what?" "Your mind, idiot. That's where I am." "Oh, right." Naruto shook his head, trying to clear it. It was difficult. There were all sorts of important things to think about. The exam, Kurama's freedom, what Kurama looked like. There was a sudden pull that sent him tumbling into water and left him with a headache. "Nar, I thought I taught you better mental control." Nar got his feet back under him and his head out of the water. "Sorry, there's just a lot on my mind." Kurama sighed and Nar finally turned his head towards him and the cage around him for the first time. Kurama himself looked absolutely magnificent. He towered over Nar, of course, even curled up on the ground as he was, but his ears, his tails, it was different from the other foxes, and even the summoning foxes like Fukuda, but it still felt right. And even though he shoved the thought into the deepest recesses of his mind the moment he thought it, he was kind of jealous of his fur. The cell and even the area outside of it was dark, dingy, and was covered in a foot and a half of water that didn't smell terrible, but it didn't exactly look the cleanest either. Everything reinforced what he had thought before and made all his little excuses fall to ash. "I really have to get you out of here. Nar, you know I won't leave you as soon as I'm out, right?" Naruto froze, then collapsed into a sitting position right outside the cage. "But everyone hates you. Or at least they definitely will once they realize what's going on. It's a lot safer if you leave." Kurama's glare was a lot more effective in person. "And what of you then? Am I to leave you entirely defenseless, but they won't let you stay?" "Tough. They don't have a choice. And if they get violent about it, we're both going together." Naruto gaped. "But you can always protect Konoha from a distance if need be. But I'm not losing you because of their rampant stupidity. Besides, only the Hokage need know of my presence until it's frankly too late for anyone else to protest." Naruto frowned. There were many ways this could potentially go wrong. But he couldn't quite bring himself to protest. "That isn't what I brought you here to talk about, though." He looked up. "It isn't. I'm sure you've noticed something, Naruto. I've taught you better than that, but I doubt you'd come to this conclusion, and I'd rather you know the truth rather than come to any unfortunate ones. I'm sure you've noticed that I've been particularly nice to you in particular, while my opinion of humans in general is still rather lower than yours." Naruto tensed. "I was asleep when it happened. It could have been an enemy jutsu, an accident, or maybe even something you did as a last resort. I don't know. All I know is that one moment I was asleep inside you and the next I woke up outside you all the way back when I was attacking Konoha. You have too." Understand we were partners then. You had proved yourself to be strong enough to force me to behave even before we were friends and there was no seal at all. I still thought you were being stubborn and just weren't talking to me when I was attacked. And thinking we were still in the war, I retaliated. Naruto suddenly understood and his eyes widened. I could have prevented all of this. Your mother would still have died regardless of my involvement. But you could have had a father, a proper one, and he could have made sure that people knew who you really were. You wouldn't have had to grow up with all the hate. But I was too arrogant, too confident in my own ability. And we all paid for my mistake. Naruto's voice was shaky. I forgive you. You don't have to, Kit. No, I forgive you. Kurama's eyes looked up from the floor of his cell. Naruto's voice was a lot stronger this time, and his expression was firm. He would have done a better job, you know. He knew a lot more about sealing. He knew more about hand signs, human physiology. And he loved you, Nar. More than anything. Naruto's voice cracked slightly. Thanks, and you're right. It would have been nice to meet him, and maybe he would have done a better job. I don't know, but you're here now, and he clenched his fist, then forcefully unclenched it. It's useless to talk about what could have been because it isn't. And I'm glad I met you. There was a long silence. Thank you. Naruto took a deep breath. Thanks for telling me about all this. You didn't have to do that. No, I did. We're coming up on some events that I can't prepare you for fully if you don't know what's going on. We can't be taking chances here. There's an enemy that's likely to appear in these tuning exams that will be able to seal off your access to my chakra because of the nature of the seal. What should I do? Create clones of me and don't stop. The more of me is out, the better I can protect you. I don't know if I'll be able to outright defeat this person directly given the rate that you have been going at. And if I tell you to stop making these clones, stop because your body will need to adjust if things happen too fast. But this is our best chance. Naruto nodded firmly. All right, I should start now. Kurama shook his head. One more thing. Dispel the clone. I want to test something. He didn't actually need to be outside for this. A simple thought. Wait. I don't think I can dispel your clone. Of course not. He's me. Just crush him. Don't worry. He already knows the plan and agrees with it. Naruto nodded hesitantly. All right. If you're sure. It was a lot easier to exit his mind than enter it. And despite his hesitation, he squashed the fox in his pocket, which poofed into red chakra, which then seeped right back into his body. Naruto could hear Kurama's somehow audible sigh of relief. Good. That's encouraging. As long as a part of me is in you, I can't disperse. Disperse. I can't die. But it takes an annoyingly long time to reform. Time we don't have. Still, you don't have to worry about me leaving. Even if I didn't want to stay near you, I don't want to find out there's a limit on how far away this works. All right, like I said, don't worry about it. Now, get started on those clones. Nar, you were here the whole time. What's with you lately? Should I tell them? Maybe later. Now is not the time. Just a project. Don't worry about it. Sakura looked as if she might protest, but Sasuke nodded. Watch out for a Kohan ninja in a green jumpsuit. He's a Tatsu expert, but he's strong enough where I don't know how I would fare in a real fight against him. Naruto's eyes brightened. Oh, you're talking about Lee. Yeah, he's pretty good. Sasuke blinked in visible surprise. You know him. He wasn't in our class at the academy. Yeah, I would often see him training in the early morning. We didn't talk all that much since his sensei said something like his style wouldn't work well for me, but he complimented me on my own training. Something about being youthful. I don't really remember all that well. But he's definitely really strong. Yeah. Both Sasuke and Sakura looked speculatively over at Lee, who was just entering the room with his team. They had both seen what Naruto could do with the Q.B's power. If he said that Lee was strong, we should hand in our registration forms, though. They wouldn't let me do it without you, too. Sakura frowned. Really? I wonder why. Kakashi suddenly appeared behind them. Because just like everything else, the Chunin exams are taken in teams of 3. Aside from the final tournament, that is before then. If a single one of you fail, the rest of you do, too. Her eyes lit up. Like your bell test. Precisely. She gave an embarrassed grin. I honestly thought that was just you to know the other villages do that too. Kakashi's expression grew serious. Not all villages value teamwork, Sakura. But all at least recognize the utility of a 3-man team. She nodded seriously, then noticed that Nar was back to his odd meditation. Come on, let's get to the registration desk. The fact that Naruto would pause every few seconds did not escape her notice. Naruto stared at the exam paper in front of him, sweating profusely. What am I supposed to do? I've been training, not studying. Does your brain seriously stop working every time you need it, or are you doing this just to annoy me? Naruto spluttered. Are you even looking at these questions? This is ridiculous. They can't possibly expect. His head made a loud thump on his desk. I see your brain finally kicked in. Try to do that sooner next time. Haha. Naruto scanned the room discreetly. With a room full of Janine and an examination meant to test information gathering, there must be a few plants that actually knew the answers from the start. If the examiners were really smart, those people would also be genin and therefore harder to spot. But that might give them an advantage at future exams, so they would likely be tuning. Aha. There. He only needed one after all. Now to actually get the information. A crowded examination wasn't the worst place to sneak through, but it was pretty low. Considering everyone was sitting in rows, so shadow clones were out of the question. He only knew about physical stealth, not any particular stealth jutsu. They wouldn't be very useful to you right now anyway. You can't suppress your chakra enough for them to have much of an effect. His head drifted to his equipment pouch where Kurama had grown to fill the palm of his hand. Interesting idea. Good one, too. I have a direct line of communication. And you're a lot smaller than my clones. Naruto already had plans for his own clones, though. Kurama had always taught him that the less he relied on his fuzzy friend, the better he would be in the long run. He definitely didn't use those words, though. Those words stayed deeply in his subconscious where they wouldn't result in a month of sadistic retaliation. All right, I have a good view of things. So, for question 1, Naruto finished with the exam in record time. You do realize that I will expect you to solve some of these on your own in the future, right? What? Not the stupid physics problems. You learn better with practice. I mean the ciphers and strategy questions. If you are going to be promoted, you need to learn these things. So, this was a real test and I failed. It was a little of both. They don't expect Janine to have the answers to all 9 questions, and neither do they expect a Janine to have perfect information gathering ability. Naruto nodded. They already had seen quite a few counts of points being docked for cheating, and even a few teams expelled because they were so bad at it. He had to respect the chief examiner. Though, Marino Iki, his glare was enough to keep even the rowdiest and most arrogant Janine in line and barely had to do even that. Not to mention the 10th Question. It would have even worked at intimidating him if Kurama hadn't taught him extensively about intervillage affairs. Koa Genin would definitely think he had the authority to bar him from future exams. And even foreign ninja didn't seem like they were aware enough to realize that while they had the authority to administer the test and issue recommendations, it was ultimately up to individual villages to decide who graduated. After all, a hostile village could otherwise block foreign genin from graduating at all. Otherwise, the only real reason to host an exam would be to show your military power, even among the weakest members. The Juon trials were kept secret for obvious reasons. He discreetly monitored Sakura and Sasuke. Though, Sakura in particular looked nervous but gritted her teeth and seemed to gather a certain stubbornness to continue. Interestingly, the first team to give up included the Tunin Naruto copied from. And after that, more and more people seemed to lose their nerve. Do you want to know what happened last time? There was a chuckle from inside his head. You made this giant rallying speech about not quitting and completely ruined the tense atmosphere. Naruto frowned. Should I do that? A lot of people are leaving. Of course not. I mean, last time it kept Sakura from giving up. Not that you noticed, but it kept a lot of people in that should not have made it to the next test. Less people will die that way. And while I certainly don't care about the people who did, they might help out minimally if war breaks out. Naruto sighed. All right, not all humans are that bad. Many of them are even tolerable. But I have a hard time caring about people who hate both of us with a passion. So everyone who is still here. Naruto's head whipped up to Aki. Good call. So all 54 of you. He smirked, dropping his hardline expression completely. You've just passed the first exam. I kind of figured with my help. Okay, fine. Amid various outbursts of confusion and outrage, Naruto just settled back down, making more clones. After more than 30 minutes, the first Kurama had already filled his equipment pouch and was rather cramped, so he was creating a second one in a different pocket. They could be recombined later. Pay attention. He's going to say something actually important here. He looked up again. Of course, anyone who cheated in an obvious or clumsy way failed. And with that, Ibiki removed his forehead protector and his head covering with it. Naruto visibly recoiled. Intellectually, he knew what was behind tear torture and interrogation. It was necessary, so necessary. In fact that some concepts were gone over in the academy. Kurama expanded on those lessons extensively to prepare him. But he had never actually seen something like this in person. Still, he was one of a few unfortunate people in the room who could identify what most of the marks actually were and how they were administered. They failed because there may be circumstances in which being caught in an act of espionage can cost you more than just your life. You pay in ways taken from you little by little, time and time again, with lives hanging in the balance. Naruto briefly wondered if Abiki wore the gloves he did for a similar reason. In addition, the information you obtain cannot be trusted if you cannot keep your present secret from the enemy. Learn that and learn it well. If you bring back intelligence from a compromised operation, you are doing your enemy's work for them and putting those you serve in danger. That is why the questions were designed the way they were. It was the quickest way of weeding out those who lacked the skills to succeed. Introduction. It wasn't like Kurama hadn't thought to teach him something similar. Information gathering was one of the big important ninja things, even though only the basics were taught in the academy, and knowing the relative reliability of your information was paramount. Jiraiya's lessons were all about that. But while Kurama could talk to him and shout at him for his lessons, he couldn't exactly implant images into His head. In a lot of ninja situations, you either won or you were dead. That was easy. But he couldn't help but think that perhaps Kurama's healing would be detrimental. In this particular situation, it wasn't even the threat of horrible pain that really got to him, though it was the concrete physical proof that humans could be just as terrible as Kurama said they were. Being a ninja wasn't just about getting strong enough or clever enough to beat the enemy. It was about having the willpower to keep them safe, even if that meant you weren't returning home. Naruto already was quite familiar with training ground number 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death. It was favorite hunting ground when people weren't using it. That was quite often. It wasn't exactly popular. At first, it was a Kurama-mandated challenge, but after a while, he started going there on his own. Food always tasted better when you had to work for it. So, after Inko was done trying to intimidate everyone and started to explain the layout of the grounds, Naruto tapped his teammates on their shoulders and discreetly handed them a paper explaining things and left a clone while he slipped off. In a henge, he briefly thought about stealing 2 scrolls early, one of each type, to make sure they had the correct combination, but he wasn't sure if the ninja and that covered shed were simple paperwork genin or something much more dangerous to rob. What he could do is slip through the chain link fence as a beetle before the exam started and get prepared properly. The forest was huge. He'd have to spend several days if he wanted to rig the entire area, even with his clones. But what he could do is scout a relatively safe path with plenty of forage materials for his team to follow, as well as cover each team as they entered, hopefully getting intelligence on which had the scroll they needed as well as their relative experience and properly focus on getting more of Kurama out of his body without having to worry about people asking what he was doing. He would stay relatively close to his team, but unless something serious went wrong, his clones would be the only ones visible. He would stay behind, constantly meditating and trying to improve his efficiency. Giving his shadow clones more chakra wasn't exactly something Naruto had given much priority to. The only jutsu that actually required a lot of chakra to complete was his summoning jutsu, which clones couldn't use for obvious reasons, or the shadow clone jutsu itself, which was just silly. Doing so without accidentally getting too determined about it and leaking his will into the technique was a nightmare. But if Kurama was worried about an enemy during the Chunin exams, and not only was this the perfect time to do this without immediately alerting everyone in the village, it was also the perfect time for someone to attack without village security finding out about it. But eventually, he got into a rhythm that was surprisingly effective. So, what's the plan here other than the obvious? There was a long silence, but Kurama eventually responded. This is a long shot, but the ninja who shows up in this exam, he causes a lot of trouble for us later, directly and indirectly. The most immediate of which is putting a seal on that Akia teammate of yours. Everybody said that was the main reason why he went insane and betrayed the village. But since all Akia I've ever encountered have been insane, I have a different idea about that. Either way, it makes him very annoying in the future. Naruto just barely stopped himself from responding out loud, and entirely ruining his stealth. Wait, Sasuke betrays Konoha. Shut up. There's a lot more that's more important. Later on, he uses a jutsu, which is later improved, that resurrects imperfect but almost invincible copies of dead ninja. Combined with the actions of another organization, it's really bad news for everyone, including myself. Killing this guy this early would be great, as at this point he's not expecting anyone of his level and will be testing rather than fighting for real. Naruto. nodded in acknowledgement, trying to both pay attention to Kurama's words and forming his next clone. Only problem is he's a underscore to kill. I can do it, but not only would you have to get at least half of me free, but it would likely destroy a good portion of the training grounds, and I know you would get pissy at me for killing comrades. Naruto rolled his eyes. You think our best chance is to get him to realize that he might be outmatched and retreat early without marking the Iha. At the same time, we really want to make sure that he doesn't know that I am out of my cage. There was a large sigh. That means that you can only send clones into the fight and only enter if my chakra bomb fails to make him retreat. Naruto gave a frustrated groan. But I don't care about keeping you a secret. But I do. If it gets out that I am free and more than just an illusion, and especially if the Akatsuki get a hold of that information, they will send people to seal me. You know that I'm still bound to you. And I know that, but they won't. And you are not ready to fight Akatsuki members. Not yet. What about the old man or Jiraiya? They'll definitely make a stink about it, certainly. But yes, they can know, especially Jiraiya, as we'll need to set up chakra blocking seals to conceal my presence. My point is that he must think that you only control my power and nothing else. We will utilize the element of surprise. I know where he likely will attack and when it will most likely happen. When is that? About 3 hours. Your job is to get your teammates out of there before they get vaporized. Use that teleportation jutsu, but that needs to stay secret, too. Which is why chakra writing is important. Never mind. Write the seals backwards and keep the papers upside down at all times. Even if the snake bastard doesn't die, at least the evidence will be destroyed. Naruto's eyes hardened. Then I have no time to waste. The 2 sets of paper for the Hiraishin took very little time to make. Even before Kurama's training, Naruto was taught as far back as the academy to take in a page of paper verbatim before even trying to process it. So, he could recreate the seals with confidence, especially after his training in them. He didn't have to understand anything actually in them. The only slight difficulty was doing everything in reverse, but he could do it, and the test fire with a clone seemed to work perfectly, so he wasn't putting his teammates in danger. Now though, especially since they were already set up in the area to ambush from, he was working with full concentration on getting more of Kurama out. His instincts wanted him to set more than this one trap. But setting off traps before the ambush would alert the bastard that someone else was there, and after wouldn't matter since everything would be pretty much dust. And it was working. Kurama was half again as tall as he was. And even more encouragingly, Kurama had mentioned that he was compressing himself in order to not be as blindingly obvious. He usually only took that absolutely massive form when he was fighting on his own scale if he felt like using the intimidation factor or someone incompetent was controlling him. The only issue was that it was getting harder and harder. He was getting better at manipulating his own will and even narrowing down the precise amount of chakra that was his maximum. But that chakra was getting harder to separate and harder to focus. He was also getting a little bit dizzy. Stop now. Naruto's head jerked up. I can't stop now. You need to be powerful and I can't really do much. The fighting has already started. Hiraishin now. Naruto shook his head to clear it, alert almost instantly. Right here I go. 6 clones poofed into existence, each grabbing an appropriate paper curled into a roll to prevent anyone from reading it. Stealth clones. They all turned into foxes. Good enough. Get going now. All of them ran off, rolls of paper in their mouths while Kurama started to gather chakra. As soon as they got into the area Kurama had described, One of the fox clones swore. God damn it, he already got Sasuke. And it looked like Sakura wasn't in too good of shape either. Orochimaru had already marked Sasuke and it looked like he was getting away. Worse, his clone wasn't there. Which meant that there was a limit for how far memories and chakra would travel. Back to their owner. He hadn't noticed a thing when it had disappeared. Now he screamed. It wasn't in English, but it definitely got Orochimaru's attention, and he paused just long enough for them to transform back, slap the papers down, and flash his teammates away. Kurama was not happy. Not because of Nar, though he'd like to be mad at his instant demand for an attack that needed charging. No, it was because his entire plan was falling apart, and it was mostly his fault for not being quite as observant as he needed to be. It was mostly a lack of practice. If he was honest with himself, he was the one that could detect emotional auras and Nar was the one with the eyes, and they had each other's backs or back singular since they were always together. So despite being half out and therefore just as strong as when he was with Nar the first time, his chakra bomb was incomplete, perfectly fine enough for most opponents, especially the relatively unprepared ones, but not enough to entirely vaporize Orochimaru, which meant as long as he still had chakra, he could use that stupid jutsu to regenerate himself. Of course, the bomb being smaller might be considered something good for Naruto since it means it was less likely that another Konoha ninja got caught at the edge of the blast, but it was so close. Sasuke still had that stupid mark that would make him even more stupid than other Akihand. Orochimaru wouldn't even die. At least his expression after regeneration was clear enough. His invasion plan was almost certainly off. But before leaving, the Sannin paused. Jin Shuriki can't make tailed beast bombs. Kurama frowned. Yes, they could, as long as everyone involved was working in harmony, but he doesn't know that. Stupid bastard. He immediately started to charge another attack, but it wasn't going to be enough. There was a clear path along the previous attack and a huge crater. Orochimaru knew where they were. Orochimaru took one look at Kurama, glanced significantly at Nar, who was most certainly separate, and vanished fast enough that he was most certainly not prepared to follow. Kurama gritted his teeth in anger, purposefully letting the gathered chakra explode in his mouth. It was painful, but he deserved it for making a plan more worthy of Naruto than the greatest of the tailed beasts. It had been a huge risk, and he didn't have Naruto's luck. He lost and lost badly. The third Hokage appeared in a swirl of leaves and palled at the sight of Kurama, now at the edge of the crater he created. Don't worry, old man. I'm not here to destroy anything, except for pretentious snake bastards, perhaps. Hiruzen immediately entered a battle stance. He already left. By the way, where's Naruto? The question came from two sources, one considerably more panicked than the other. Jiraiya had arrived fast enough to need to catch his breath. Right here. Nar waved as he walked out from behind the fox. Jiraiya gaped. What did you do? Nar smirked. Well, technically speaking, Kurama here's just a shadow clone. Tail whacked him lightly on the back of the head, causing brief panic among the twitchy ninja and a more genuine smile from Nar. It's true. Not my fault. The shadow clone jutsu was probably based on you. Jiraiya took a deep breath. So, you figured it out, did you? I thought I told you not to try any seals I hadn't approved yet. Naruto shrugged. Found a way to do it without seals. Like I said, shadow clone jutsu. Just like with a lot of stuff that Kurama taught me about being somebody made of chakra, neither Jiraiya nor the Hokage looked particularly happy. But to Naruto's delight, Neither of them looked like they were going to force Naruto to do anything drastic to keep Kurama out. We have a problem. That snake bastard saw me. He also got away. Naruto winced. Sorry, but he was already starting to leave. Not your fault, Kit. But we have to be prepared for the Akatsuki now, and that isn't going to be easy. Jiraiya didn't know exactly when and how either Naruto or the QB found out about the Akatsuki, least of all their goals, but he did have important information. My sources say that Orochimaru has left the Akatsuki. He was expelled for attacking a member. Yes, but his greed for the sharing has already been fulfilled. Jiraiya frowned, remembering the state that Sasuke had been in when he had appeared in front of him and the cause for that state. Besides, what better bargaining chip is there than the strongest of the tailed beasts, apparently entirely free and ready for capture? Sarcasm was practically dripping from his mouth. I caught the relevant detail. Apparently free. Naruto answered for him. His freedom is a work in progress. I didn't have enough time to get all of him out. Speaking of, he put his hands into a seal, but Kurama whacked him with a tail. Physical forms were so much more useful. And you won't do any more until we figure out what those side effects mean. Side effects? Hi, Jiraiya. And to their surprise, Nar asked at the same time. Kurama sighed. You didn't notice. Of course, you didn't notice. Your chakra control was gone to crap. You were almost ready to pass out, and you didn't notice. Naruto rubbed the back of his head nervously. Oops. He decided that now might be the time to put an optimistic spin on things, when there were those that might make his life very difficult otherwise. You've done a lot today, Nar. Perhaps your body just needs to adjust properly. He turned back to the two humans. Even in his rather compressed form, he was still at least tall enough that he had to look downwards. I am not quite in as much danger as the Akatsuki might believe. I do not plan to be fully released. Why? Simply put, it means that I cannot be controlled or captured by someone else. If I am dispersed or disperse myself, I return to Naruto as long as part of my chakra remains. Jiraiya frowned. If that is your plan this entire time, why separate further? Because freedom was not my ultimate goal. Frankly, Naruto already has extraordinary power he had to have in order to contain me. Removing myself only ensures that he is able to reach that potential. Why do you care about Naruto so much? Kurama snorted. Because I felt like it. Why does it matter? Because I care about Naruto Fox. What do you think? Kurama's glare and burst of killing intent reminded Jiraiya of exactly who he was talking to. And he physically recoiled. Fine. It's because Nar is the first human that showed that he could be more than just another squabbling insect that collapses their own den for a scrap of food. Happy, Jiraiya took a deep breath to calm himself, and his sensei put a hand on his shoulder as he looked up at Kurama with a different perspective. The Hokage was old and had seen quite a lot of human behavior himself. Naruto had told him the QB was a person, and he had given Nar the benefit of the doubt, but it had never quite occurred to him what that meant with the proper context. If the tailed beasts were not simple natural calamities to be tamed and controlled, it didn't just mean that they were responsible for their actions. It meant that the villages were responsible for what they did to the tailed beasts as well. In that light, Kurama's attack on the village would have been understandable even if Nar hadn't mentioned that he had been controlled. Konoha had been responsible for all the original sealings, not to mention what everyone did afterwards. You'll have to be hidden. Not imprisoned, of course, as long as you can keep your excursions stealthy. That was the plan. Yes, until the Akatsuki found out. Anyway, that is. The Hokage shook his head. No, I'm afraid it's simpler than that. Fundamentally, if more than a few key ninja knew of your existence, your free existence, I would have a village-wide riot on my hands. Ah, so only a little worse than Naruto. Then, Heroine winced. Not your fault. Most humans are panicky idiots. You have done an acceptable job. Thank you. I suppose. Regardless, you have a point. I will be expanding Naruto's apartment. Jiraiya, I expect you to either teach Nar or place chakra masking seals on the borders. Both of them looked at him oddly. Nobody lives on the same floor as Nar. Might as well use the spare wood. And he needs the room if I'm going to be living with him. Hiruzen felt suddenly guilty for not checking up on Naruto nearly as often as he should. Jiraiya just looked vaguely sad and nodded his assent at his request. What are we going to do about the Akatsuki, though? I know something about their members, and I do not think Konoha could withstand a coordinated assault. Even with you on our side, on Naruto's side, same thing in this case. Kurama nodded, conceding the point. Villagers aside, those in power consistently put Naruto first, sometimes against sense. He could appreciate that. I don't think we would fare well in direct battle. Do either of you have any plans? Hai shook his head. You would know more about their abilities than I. Kurama took a deep breath. Not a plan that I wanted to use. No, and even then, I am not entirely sure that there will be enough time. But there might be a way to make Naruto sage. There is such thing as a fox sage. Then Jiraiya waved him off. All summon animals have a method whether they remember it or not. But that doesn't matter because Nar is far too young. Even I can't get it done perfectly and I have decades of experience. And toads are the easiest to learn from. Their oil is entirely unique. Regardless, as soon as the Akatsuki realize that they cannot seal me the way I am, they will go after Naruto next. He might die, and he will die if he is not yet ready. Besides, what better place for Naruto to hide than a place that has not been set foot in since the time of the first Hokage? Well, technically, I went there when I got the summoning contract. What's a sage, though? I'll tell you later. Let me finish here. Jiraiya sighed. You really think he's ready? Actually, no, he did not. Normally, the fox style of sage was entirely incompatible with humans, which was fortunate. Otherwise, Madara would have been even more insufferable than he already was. He was talented enough otherwise to master it like Hashiyama did. But he had been pondering the side effects that Naruto had been experiencing. They were not entirely consistent with chakra shock, usually only experienced by ninja as chakra exhaustion, and the fact that one of the other humans he respected, Gar, retained some of Shikaku's powers, even without a trace of him in his body. It was a long shot. But he had messed up and long shots were all he had. He has to be. Nar was disappointed that getting Sasuke and Sakura out of there meant that their chances at becoming Tun were automatically forfeit. But Kurama reminded him that in actual battle situations, rank only mattered when it came to leadership. You were used where your talents lay, no exception. Rank only affected what missions you got in peacetime where more international treaties applied. That only brought up the more subtle dread that almost certainly in the near future they would be at war. But now that he thought of it, Kurama's almost frantic training wasn't to get him to be Hokage. That didn't really have a time limit. No, he was preparing him for this instead. The way Orochimaru had risen from his own corpse, even though he hadn't been that close to see any of the grisly detail, it still gave him shivers. Right now, though, they were doing other things, more see things like moving Kurama in with him in the physical sense. They had just finished expanding Naruto's apartment. It was actually just a matter of knocking down the walls that could reasonably be removed without collapsing the roof. But expanding sounded better. And with Jiraiya seals in place and a large and rather expensive cushion for Kurama to sit on, they could finally get him actually in there. To his relief, Haitian actually worked and he didn't lose all of his work in bringing him out to begin with. But now that everything was done, there was finally a moment to sit down and talk. So, what's a sage? Before I answer that, I suppose I should tell you more about so-called summon animals. Do you know why that they take chakra as payment for their services? Naruto frowned. I guess I didn't really think about it that much. It's just so they don't get too tired fighting, right? Ninja don't use something unless it is beneficial to them. More importantly, that it gives something that they cannot provide otherwise. The summoning jutsu is very costly chakra-wise. Why not use that chakra for something like a high power just to instead? Unless the summoned animal has more knowledge and experience, there is little reason to do so. If the chakra was simply to power the summons techniques directly, not efficient either, as it has to power the transportation as well. What is it used for? Then, simple. Most intelligent creatures do not have chakra, only their own life energy. But they can control chakra if it is given to them. The combination of the two energies can create unique effects that ninja cannot produce with their own manipulation. But, I thought chakra was life energy. Kurama shrugged, shifting a tail so Naruto had enough room next to him to sit comfortably rather than just lean awkwardly at the edge. For humans, maybe. Don't ask me how that happened. It was before I was born. The point is that is the main reason that summons have a time limit depending on the chakra given. What about sages then? I was getting to that. In the most basic of terms, a sage is one who learns how to gather nature energy from around them. It is the energy of life. Humans called it yuki, probably because they couldn't use it themselves. It exists everywhere and is surprisingly powerful when used correctly. Though only UK, the so-called summoning animals, use it in techniques like ninja do. All the tribes have their own secret methods just as the villages have their secret techniques. For example, the toads are particularly famous for producing human sages as well as some techniques that allow for some truly rapid gathering of energy. Human sages, are they different? I mean, that kind of matters for me. Technically, no. The animal sages are able to get chakra by being summoned and, along with their natural energy gathering skills, are able to multiply their power that way. But human sages already have their own chakra. So there is no real functional difference in power. They simply end up in more legends as it is significantly harder for a human to become a sage in the first place. Why is that? Simple. They have chakra, not natural energy, and need that to function. The gathered energy is foreign, so they have to learn both gathering and using the two energies at once. Two disciplines that are hard on their own. Chakra systems and natural energy systems have a fundamentally different structure. Naruto Sidate. And I have to learn, don't I? I can't even get chakra writing down. I have a feeling you would have more success now. There is a second inconvenience. Though that just might cancel both those problems out. What's that? You see, it's well documented that gathering too much nature energy is dangerous for a human, as their bodies are not designed for it and often transform with usually disastrous results. Not only that, but fox sages have our method has never been exactly designed for humans. Not our specialty. That's supposed to make me feel better. I've also been thinking about the side effects. You started to get near the end there with pulling me out. I may not have the nature Energy I once did, but when I was given chakra, it still flows in the same way. Naruto frowned. Kurama said he was a summon and that his chakra was unnatural, but never in this detail. He certainly hadn't heard of nature energy before. What are you saying? I'm saying that there's a very good chance that when you adapted to be able to hold me, you adapted a little further than that. You might be able to hold nature energy a little easier than most might. Trust me, I don't like this risk either. If there was another way, I'd take that. Nar sighed, remembering the conversation in the forest. All right, I get it. So, how do I gather this nature energy? Don't know myself. We have to go to the foxes and hope that a sage is still alive. Otherwise, we have a much bigger problem. Oh, it was hard to remember that Kurama wasn't the boss fox when he left. First, though, we have to get as much of me out of you as possible. I'm afraid that might be less than we'd hoped. But the more control you have, the more likely this will work, and I'm not going to take any unnecessary chances. Kurama's prediction turned out to be accurate. Naruto didn't have as good of a gauge as the fox himself might, as he only had his size to look at, but he was barely any bigger before what Kurama called chakra confusion set in with a vengeance. Any more, and he might actually start having worse control, and that was the opposite of what they wanted. So, what do I do now? Perform the summoning jutsu. Use a large chunk of your chakra. We might get a sage. Or we might get someone else. Regardless, we can ask them to go back and summon you back to the realm if necessary. The worst case is that there is no such sage, and we're stuck figuring things out on our own. All right. Naruto jumped off the cushion and performed the jutsu in the middle of his now much cleaner apartment floor. Which was a really stupid idea, but Kurama felt he really should have known better to give Nar an instruction without clarifying properly. He forgot that Naruto hadn't really seen any of the truly massive toad summons. And while foxes could range in all sorts of sizes, regardless of tail count and actual power, a lot of the more powerful ones were quite large. So, it was with great relief that the puff of smoke was only about the size of Nar himself, and a five-tailed white vixen walked out rather than a two-story monstrosity that would bring down the entire village onto them. Nar, of course, was as tactless as ever. Hi, nice to meet you. What's your name? Fortunately, she didn't seem to take offense and smiled instead. Naruto got all the luck. I was wondering when you might summon me. Your destiny is certainly an interesting one. It certainly is, Kurama thought to himself. Nar just looked confused. What? Your use of our language is commendable, even more so that you are able to do so in your current form, but it is unnecessary. Plus, your pronunciation is terrible as a human, Kurama added. Still, she likes you and she is a seer and she doesn't cringe while looking at you. All very good signs for our plan. I hear you gave Fukuda his name. Nar got a little nervous. Was I supposed to do that? She chuckled. It was not the traditional time. No, but it caused no harm. He likes the name. Mine is Hikari since you have asked. He smiled. I'm Nar. I know, she said with a hint of amusement. You came to me for aid in sage training. Kurama spoke for the first time. Will it succeed? Yes, he is compatible. However, he will not find Yuki on his own within the time necessary. What do I do? Then, I must infuse the energy into you myself. That doesn't sound so bad. She looked at him carefully. It will not be a pleasant experience. I suggest that we either retire to the woods or you silence this room properly. Any interruptions will result in your likely death. Naruto gulped. Oh, Kurama was equally uncomfortable. He had been around quite a lot of humans and their pain tolerance was quite a lot lower than most other animals and most certainly foxes. Naruto wasn't most ninja, but if a fox said something was not a pleasant experience, it was likely on par with some of the worst of human tortures. But he wasn't about to stop their only chance at success. And as expected, Naruto's face hardened. He grit his teeth and agreed. This procedure is delicate. It will be of great help if you were to remain still during the operation. Kurama got upright. Get your ninja wire. The strong stuff and start placing seals. I'll get your bed. Did you really have to use your mouth? Naruto grumbled. I have to sleep on that. Quit your complaining. And seriously, did you have to get rid of the mattress before tying me on here? Do you even understand the kind of pain you're about to be in? Gulped. He had seen enough of his teacher and friend's expressions over the last 3 minutes. Yeah, I just was trying not to think about it. Sorry. Kurama's response was oddly subdued and lacked any of the usual sarcasm that accompanied his apologies. Just stay close. All right. He nodded. Hikari moved to the side of the bed so smoothly she might have floated. Her calm nature might have helped Naruto's state of mind, but it was actually the difference between her attitude and Kurama's that made him nervous. Are you ready, Naruto? Yes, ma'am. Then I will begin. There was no warm-up. There was no warning, other than her stated declaration. There was simply pain. It started in his head and only spread from there down his spine and into his stomach before lancing into his heart. It wasn't like any other pain. If he stabbed himself with a canny, there'd be a spike of intense pain, sure, but it would be quickly dulled. His body would inform him about the injury in a way he couldn't ignore. Then it would take a backseat with only a persistent reminder that the injury was still there and should be taken care of soon. This was something else entirely. If there was a jutsu designed to keep a ninja at the spiking level of pain at all times, this is what he would imagine it would feel like. There was no respite. There was no hope of relief. There was no fluctuation. There was only simple pain. Done. And then it stopped just as abruptly. Okay. Maybe not completely. He still felt like utter crap. And there wasn't a part of his body that didn't feel sore. But it was like he trained every muscle on his body for 8 hours, not like he was dipped in lava while drinking it at the same time. Did Naruto coughed, wincing. Did it work? Hikari smiled lightly and nodded. Yes, it was a success. Congratulations, you now hold both natural energy and chakra. Kurama, who had been busy ripping out the large amounts of ninja wire with his claws, froze suddenly. She looked at him. You are no longer bound by our laws, but you do understand why this must remain a secret among us. I can still be summoned. I will keep our secrets. For the first time, Hikari appeared surprised. I see. I had assumed your contract had been broken. I thought it was as well. It was not. From what I can tell, none of the 9 broke contract even with the changes. But was what you said true? He has Yuki of his own. Naruto finally felt okay enough to sit up, and he barely had started to check himself over before he was frowning. Where are my ears? That completely derailed Kurama's line of thought. Oh, there they are. He rolled his eyes. Naruto was just being his usual self. Why do I have fox ears? Okay, maybe not. Do I have a tail? Kurama was about to round on Hikari when she answered. It is simple. In order to gather Yuki, you must sense it. In order to sense it, you must have it. That is the reason why sages are so rare. Half human, half fox. Why have I not seen this before? If you have the knowledge, it has a 95% mortality rate. What? That is a better rate than humans attempting other methods of becoming a sage. Besides, with you bound to him, the rate was lowered to a mere 10%. Kurama forced his anger down. It was already done. Besides, this was the best option out of the alternatives. Of course, it was, but it would have been nice to know the risks before, though he wasn't quite sure he could have managed to endure the screams if he actually did know about them. Thank you. He managed to grind out with some semblance of politeness. Is there anything else you need to do? Nothing that you cannot provide yourself. Good day. She disappeared in a poof of smoke. Kurama sighed. He really wanted to stay angry, but if what she had said was actually true, well, this might actually make up for his mistake of getting Akatsuki attention almost 3 years too early. Last time, with shadow clones and the ability to gather natural energy, he had a huge advantage. In battle, as the combination of the two energies were not only powerful, but circumvented many of the screw you, I'm invincible jutsu types that were so annoying to deal with. But if he had an actual source of that energy, well, that was another matter entirely. He would have the natural ability to use sage moves even without preparation. Even if that pool was small, even having a pool meant that it could be trained in with permanent access. That meant that he could do more than just enhanced chakra-based jutsu. He could learn natural techniques as well and enhance those with chakra. Why do I have a tail? Kurama turned. Naruto's hands were upsetly loosening rolls of ninja wire from his legs, but his head was tracking a gray appendage that was moving erratically in front of it. Occasionally, one of his ears would flick, which messed with his ninja instincts, and his head would whip around to look at nothing. He winced. If the kid actually had been young for a human, this wouldn't have been a problem. The brain was a malleable thing, and Naruto in general was not one to dig his heels in with changes to the usual routine. Quite the opposite, but they had been training almost every day for years, getting intimately familiar with his body. Subtle natural growth was one thing. Relocating in, changing the shape of facial features, growing in an appendage that was a weak point. On humans, not remotely the same. He didn't even try to calm him down. He wasn't good at it, and he wasn't about to learn now. Nar was the one that always calmed him down, but he did have vague memories of something that might help. So he ripped the last bits of wire that bound him to the bed and picked him up by the back of his red outer coat. He didn't protest, which was a good sign or a bad one. Kurama wasn't sure. His memory from that far back wasn't very good. But when he brought him over to the cushion, placed him in the middle, and curled around the boy, it wasn't long for his breathing to slow down, his muscles to relax, and finally his eyes to fall closed. Tomorrow, they could deal with all that tomorrow. Nurud woke up in extreme comfort. Too much comfort. His bed wasn't this good, and neither were hospital beds, so it was unlikely that something went that badly. But his quick assessment of his surroundings while laying still as he was taught showed him that no, he wasn't captured or otherwise in danger. No, for some reason, he was using Kurama as a bed. This set off its own wave of panic before he realized that since he didn't actually remember going to bed last night, and not even a clone would be stupid enough to try something like this on its own, Kurama himself must have put him here. Either he was very worried about him or he had an unexpected soft side. Naruto wasn't entirely sure which was more disturbing. At the same time, Kurama wasn't up yet, and he was still kind of tired. And besides, when was he going to have a chance like this again? So, he settled back down, pushing a little deeper into the fur, and entirely missing the fact that Kurama was in fact awake. Kurama sighed internally. This wasn't the sort of behavior he wanted to encourage. Deception among allies was poison. Training your ability to lie was one thing. Deceiving a friend was another. And while this particular lie was quite harmless, it led to attitudes he did not want anywhere near Naruto. At the same time, yesterday was an ordeal, and he likely would have let Nar sleep in regardless. He needed time to think anyway. The entire ordeal with Orochimaru was problematic. It was a decent plan, if one without any backup plan, even remotely possible. The issue was that he got complacent. Overestimated his own intel. Wasn't ninja enough. A single mistake was all it took for something to go wrong. Something that he drilled into Naruto's head from day one, but neglected to apply himself. You gather intelligence first, then plan. No, you plan first on the intelligence you do have, gather more, then modify said plan accordingly. Kurama neglected the last two steps in favor of his own ego. That had to stop. Nar was the perfect ninja for intelligence gathering. And he used precisely none of his skills. More importantly was the fact that this was exactly the same mistake as he made last time. The same pride and like before Naruto was paying for all of it. Perhaps not so extremely, but he was paying all the same. And if he wasn't careful, he'd kill his friend. Perhaps. Again, if his dark suspicions were correct, Kurama sighed again, this time physically. Nar stirred, but other than shifting a little, didn't move. He was powerful. Perhaps the strongest being on the planet, but he had always pounded into Naruto. That power was not everything. Perhaps he should follow his own advice. Naruto needed others. He always did. That was his strength. Not his chakra. Not even him. His tongue won fights, more decisively than his fists. And Naruto's lack of creativity suddenly made a lot more sense. Oh, Naruto was just as crafty when it came to trap setting. And Kurama did a good job of making him as unpredictable in battle as possible. But Naruto only had Kurama's teaching, perhaps a little of Kakashi's style, but Kakashi never was an upfront or direct teacher. And Jiraiya focused on sealing rather than direct combat. Naruto's style had always been a mix of everything he had seen randomly thrown in. And it worked. That was the first thing that had impressed Kurama the first time around, though he certainly wouldn't have admitted it at the time. And he had entirely forgot this crucial detail when he trained the boy. Naruto needed the other Konoha genin. He needed their Genin sensei, and of course he still needed him. Kurama may be alone in this trip through time, but Naruto didn't need to be alone with him. First though, Naruto needed someone to stay with him and get a handle on being a fox. This time without any transformations involved. He spoke, and while his voice still rumbled, it was gentle. Nar, time to wake up. Naruto yawned and sat up. The first thing he noticed through his apartment windows was that the sun was much more prominent than it should have been. Kurama, what's going on? I don't remember you giving me a day off. Oh, he touched an ear. Nar laughed nervously. Well, I guess I'm just a bit more like you than before, huh? Kurama grunted his affirmation. I did not expect the change to be so literal, but this may prove to be more beneficial than I anticipated. As I said before, I will not fully remove myself from you until the Akatsuki thread is gone. But if what I hope is correct, and your chakra system is also more fox-like, you should have less difficulty now, which means you have the potential for much greater chakra control. Naruto nodded. Potential. That is, you will still have to train, but it will be significantly easier without my varying levels of integration interfering. Right. He opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden thought made him gasp. Kurama, can I leave? I never actually got to check on Sakura or Sasuke. Kurama shrugged. He had already told himself that any training Nar did today was to be self-inflicted. Just remember to change. We're keeping all of this as secret as possible for now. Naruto looked at him strangely, then realized what he meant. He put his hands together and transformed in a puff of smoke. Except he didn't, as he looked exactly the same afterwards that he did before. And as he had obtained a ninja's awareness of his own body, he knew exactly why it didn't work out as planned. Kurama, the fox, parts aren't affected by chakra-like at all. Kurama cursed. He knew exactly why that was the case too and should have seen this coming. It was the very reason becoming a human sage was so dangerous for other species as well. Untamed Yuki made you turn into the respective animal. But those changes could only be reversed by the same energy, not chakra. In essence, transformation for Naruto was by necessity a sage art. Maybe he could get away with just getting him to use the Yuki on its own in this case since he only wanted to look like himself. But Kurama also had memories from his own life before he ruined it by accepting the sage's offer. Transformation was a powerful tool, but nature energy always had a symbolic element, which was why it transformed unprepared users into animals or statues of those animals. You want to transform into a human. Well, in order to maintain that transformation, you had to use energy, which required you to be yourself in some way. Strange eyes, pointed teeth, a tail that you kept hidden. Even if you just wanted to be a rock, the best even a master could do was include some scratches that happened to look like a fox in the correct light. Humans really had it easy that way. But whatever the case, a day that Kurama meant for Naruto to have to himself suddenly turned into an unavoidable race for training, just like it always was. Because there was no way in hell Naruto was just going to laze around when it was one more day until he would see his teammates. It took Nar 3 days for him to even possibly look like he used to. And 3 hours before considering just going out anyway, but he quickly corrected that thought himself. He didn't even ask Kurama. Ninja were observant. Unless you were really, really good, it was hard to hide things. Maybe small things, as long as you made sure they wouldn't expect it. But not something as big as a tail or even ears. That was what gutsu were for to make people see what they expect to see and not look too closely. At first, when asked to find the new chakra or Yuki, he expected that it would somehow be the easy part. It always was when he was in the academy, back when Kurama taught him the first time. But no, he somehow had to ignore all the chakra that was already there and look for something different. That isn't to say that his training did not help him at all. In fact, his most recent training in separating his will from his chakra made him very, very aware of exactly where his chakra was flowing at all times. The issue was that even his normal chakra wasn't flowing in the same way anymore. So a lot of the times, he thought he found something, it wasn't actually new. It was only on the actual morning of the 3rd day that he realized that there weren't nearly as many differences as there should be. It was as if his new ears and tail didn't exist, and the pathways that used to go through his old ears were just missing. There should be pathways there. He didn't have a more fox-like chakra system at all. Which meant there was one that he wasn't just seeing yet, which meant those weird differences weren't because they were more fox-like. It was because there were 2 systems and they were intersecting. After that, it was easy. The Yuki was harder to draw on, and it was really small. It was weird, slippery, and didn't like to be used like the chakra he was used to. Trying to stick a scroll to his hand was strange and didn't really work well, but it worked better than he expected when it came to transformation. His first